All right, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun Reviews. Um, yeah, so the documentary for Game of Thrones Season 8, The Last Watch, just ended. It is not what I thought it was going to be, pretty much at all. It was a love fest. And before I get into it, a few things that I did catch in here that I thought was really interesting. Um, As I do want to talk about that, this was focused on the actual production of the show and what went on behind the scenes, and it really does give you an extra appreciation for the work that goes into a show this big. Um, I liked following around the stuntman who was the Night King and getting to see, how big of a deal it was for him, seeing it from his perspective. Um, a guy like that's never going to be this famous again. Like this, he can do stunt work, but he got to be something bigger, and that was really cool. That was cool about it. Um, I liked following around that extra. Was it Adam McKay or Malay or something like that? McClay. I don't know, but just watching some guy who just loves this show and has gotten to be an extra on it for years. Um, It was really, really cool. And just to be clear, this is not going to be a really long video. I was almost going to make it um, like a standard video, but I figured this is just faster for the channel to get it on here. Um, but I really dug that. I really liked how much he cared and how much he helped the extras. And I just like seeing all of this. This is like, I don't know if this was planned, like, as far as, like, did they know the backlash was going to be this bad? Because there are moments in here that now, like, looking back on it, you can kind of go, I could see maybe why Kit Harrington or somebody might take some of what we say personally when you see how much that goes into it, that, they can't just click off, uh, sometimes separate it themselves from the work that they did, whether we like it or not, the work that they put in, whether the writing was good or not. Um, it's not their fault. And I think when you're that close to something, when it's not received well, you know, people can take it very to heart, there, because it's not just them or the writers. It feels like that we're insulting. It feels like we're insulting like the whole process, and nothing can be further from the truth, because we do appreciate what went on as far as the production goes and what the actors have to go through and extras and just everything. I mean, it's maddening. Just watching this documentary was like uh, I'm not gonna. It's got nothing to do with DB&D. Like seeing this all play out is just incredible and insane. Um, and it's just really impressive the work that goes on and how much they did. But one telling thing is even the production, the way that we're watching them do this, and them in their own admission feeling it's sounding very rushed. Like they could have, you know, taken more time to do this. And instead, these people went through hell just to get D&D's uh, product done and finished and over. Another thing about that I noticed in this was, when they when we talk about how some of the actors wanted out of this show as well. And you could tell by watching it and listening to some of them, especially like near the end, Melia, who, everybody doesn't want it to end, but they want it to end. And I got that a lot throughout this. That just everybody was just so frazzled. And well, when you guys are working at breakneck speeds to just help D&D move on to Star Wars, it almost feels like the production staff and everybody else was just a part of this, you know, charade that David and Dan had going. And I don't want that to seem disrespectful to the people working on the show, because this was impressive watching all this. It's like it reminded me of the Lord of the Rings making of stuff that they had on all the extended editions and stuff, the compendiums, and seeing all the work that went into those movies. With how much money they had, I mean, think about it. They had like what was it, 100 million to do those three movies? something like that. 100 million for 3 movies, and this show got 200 million for 6 episodes. So think about all the work that went into Lord of the Rings, man, and this impressive in some ways. But again, did it really have to be this difficult? It sounds like it didn't have to be. It sounds like because of what D&D and everybody else wanted, that's why they were just pushing all these people so hard to get the show finished and done. And they can show me Kit crying and Dan, uh, uh, you know, or whatever, David, the Weiss guy, getting all emotional about it and everything. Of course they are, because they're all so close to it when they're doing it. You know, we don't have the advantage of being that close to this. We get all our news from like, you know, social media and things like that. That's how we, you know, keep up with how the show's doing and making, you know, progress and stuff like that. We're the ones in the dark. And so when the product comes out and after all that work, I can see why, you know, some people would take what we say personally because it's personal. Um, but again, it's just like this isn't about that. It's about the story and the writing. And I think that when they're making it, when you're really that close to something and you're in the middle of making it, you might not even notice or be able to know, you know, like you might have to keep your mouth shut so that you can't say anything bad about it. But there was like Conleth, who plays Varys. Um, I loved his reaction to his last scene and how he just kind of like he was upset. He was upset, and he just puts his script like, and yeah, Conleth was not happy. And I mean, I don't know if it was just, you know, because he's, you know, his character died or it was something else, but it seemed like he was genuinely upset. And Kit, when he finds out that he kills Danny, that was an interesting reaction. Um, it's also interesting that, you know, how they do everything out of order. So they all knew about all this, like how this was going to end, like a long time ago. But I think my favorite part of the documentary was right near the beginning when you could see one of the script ladies just throwing the scripts into the trash, and I thought, oh my god, that is just so fitting. Somebody just throwing Game of Thrones season 8 scripts into the trash. Like, no, 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 get all of them in there. Get all of those scripts in there. Don't just stop with those. And so it was a weird shot. It was a weird scene, but it was really fitting. And I wonder if they watched it like, um, if they watched this documentary before they let it air, to see like, because you know people are gonna have that's gonna be a meme. That girl throwing the scripts in the trash. That is going up on the Free Folk Reddit. I know it. If it isn't already, it I'm sure as soon as that was up, somebody from the Free Folk Reddit nailed that. Um, and there's a few other moments in here that just kind of made me feel like things weren't right. There weren't, but most of it really was just focused on the production. And while I actually thought, okay, well maybe this means I'll be able to catch up on some of my comic book reading. So I picked up one of my comics that I need to read, and I couldn't do it. I found myself actually really fascinated about this. And I couldn't stop watching it. I mean, I kind of was wanting it to be over, but it really was an interesting watch. And even though it feels like I'm not going to say this was a manipulation, because they'd been filming this from the beginning. But I wonder if they released it so quickly because of the backlash. But again, that's all just, you know, that's just me, you know, spouting out maybes. And so that's really all I have to say about it. It's just it showed us what we really, you know, I would really like to see, because you know, complaining and bitching about Game of Thrones, I'm tired. I think I've said everything I need to say, and So watching this and getting a new appreciation for like the production, which we already had, which I had, and I'm sure most everybody else had, and the acting and what the actors go through, I think again, it's not something. Those aren't the things that we had a problem with. But there were some, like I said, there are some telling things in this documentary that just make me go, hmm. And I, like the David Nutter was a big part of this documentary, and I like David Nutter as a director. He directed it mainly because he directed some of my favorite episodes of the X Files in the '90s. I loved David Nutter back then. Um, And so I give him a lot of slack on other things. And I mean, he goes from X Files to Game of Thrones in 2019. I mean, he did Brains of Castamere too. I mean, he's a good director, and I feel like again there are things technically wrong with some of these episodes, of course, like especially episode 3. Um, but I mean, they didn't write the episode. All they can do is try to tell the story that somebody that D&D wrote. All they can do is interpret that, and they're all up in that shit. So if it's not like the way they want it, they change it. And so I still kind of think that we need to give the directors on this show a little bit of credit, more credit than they've been getting. If you just don't like the directors, period, fine. Um, and if that's your motivation to say that it's their fault too, fine. I just don't see it that way. And so that's really all I have to say about this. And it's kind of nice to be able to say some nice things about Game of Thrones season 8 for a few minutes instead of just ending it like terribly. Oh, when they said in the part where they described how Arya attacked the Night King, and it said that she leaped over a pile of dead whites. And I was like, well, that's interesting. We didn't see that pile of dead whites. That didn't make sense to me. When was she killing the whites over by Bran? If she was, why wasn't anybody doing anything about her? Wouldn't the Night King go, hey, oh, I'm gonna deal with wheelchair boy over here in a minute. I gotta go take care of his sister. It still sounds bullshitty. There's a few things from what that and the table read. Oh, I mean the table read scene was pretty. I liked watching them. They're early, like the very first day of reading, and then going to like the last day, and them just being like, oh, and reacting to things. And I mean, I bet you that was a very. I would love to watch unedited footage of the table reads for season 8. That would be amazing. If anybody had those, oh my god, I would love to watch that shit. But because I don't know. But it was kind of amazing that D&D really weren't in this at all. And that was very important. I'm very, very glad that they weren't. In retrospect, because what we wanted to watch when we were going to watch this is we wanted to be vindicated. We wanted to see them spouting out more bullshit and more lies. And instead, no, man, that's not what they did. They didn't even bother to explain themselves on the way out the door. That's how little after they were done that they cared to explain anything. They didn't want to explain anything else. So, anyway, that's basically it. I'm just gonna. Hopefully, this is enough. I'm gonna be thinking about Game of Thrones for a good long while, but I won't watch it. And hopefully, after watching this, man, and maybe feeling like I can move on, make. I've been trying to make other content, and I did manage to succeed in making a video today that I didn't have to mention anything about Game of Thrones. I didn't let anything that happened on Game of Thrones affect my review, which is what's been happening. And so maybe making this last little bit of video about the documentary and saying, hey, it is if you like watching this kind of thing, of the work that goes into the production of a huge show like this, it is really interesting. It's really fascinating. It gives you I was like, how do people get into these jobs? how do people get that work? Like, how does somebody get to be somebody that's like, I don't know, working on Game of Thrones? Like, how do you just what? How do you have to? I don't know. It's amazing. It's like a whole other universe watching a show get made. The relationships that are in there, and now everything's just so matter of fact. Like they're standing around like I am at work sometimes, you know, where I'll be having a little conversation in the morning with somebody um, before we really get started working. And it's just so weird to think of it like that. Except I'm working, you know, customer service kind of stuff, and they're making the best television show that was the best television show, one of the best television shows up until recently. So anyway, that's it. Greater appreciation had. I still feel like there was some funny business going on, but mostly aside from those few kind of weird things that I noticed occasionally, um, I think that that's pretty much it. So I liked it, and I'm glad that we didn't have to put up with bullshit excuses. And like I said, go watch Safety Patrol, their channel where they do the phony making of behind the scenes episodes for Game of Thrones. It's really, really hilarious. So anyway, I can't believe I'm trying to figure out how to end this, but that's why I kept the Valar Morghulis on there. And so yeah, I guess I'll say the same thing. Now my watch has ended. I don't know when I'll make another Game of Thrones video, but it is what May 20 10/13 Sunday, May 26, 2019. And that might be my last Game of Thrones video for a really long time. So I want to thank everybody who watches this in the future or whenever they feel like watching it down the line. And so this is Robert Smirking on Reviews saying, yeah, like I said, now my watch has ended. And have a great night. Bye. Dead air. Dead air. Oh no.